On a quiet stretch of Dartmoor, where narrow country roads wind through open moorland and scattered stone cottages, life is usually defined by silence. It was the last place anyone expected to become the centre of one of Britain's most shocking murder investigations. On the morning of Thursday, police officers were called to the home of former Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe after concerns were raised about her welfare. When they entered the property, they found the 78-year-old dead with what police later described as serious injuries. The discovery immediately transformed what first appeared to be a welfare check into a major murder investigation. For millions of people across Britain, the news was difficult to comprehend. Anne Widdecombe had spent decades in public life. She was known for her outspoken opinions, her television appearances, and her long political career. Even after leaving Parliament, she remained one of the country's most recognisable public figures. The question was immediate: who would want to kill her? As detectives secured the property, forensic specialists began examining every room, every entrance, and every possible piece of evidence. Officers worked through the night, attempting to reconstruct the final hours before her death. One detail quickly became especially important. Investigators believe the attack may have happened almost 24 hours before her body was discovered. That meant someone had likely entered the property, attacked her, and left without immediately attracting attention. During that entire period, nobody realised something had gone terribly wrong. Detectives now faced a race against time. Every passing hour increased the risk that crucial evidence could disappear. Police later revealed that investigators believe the fatal attack occurred around lunchtime on Wednesday, nearly a full day before officers found her body on Thursday morning. Understanding everything that happened during those missing hours would become one of the central challenges of the investigation. The timeline became even more unusual when investigators looked at Anne Widdecombe's planned schedule. She had been expected to appear on a television programme later that Wednesday. Producers waiting for her appearance reportedly tried to contact her after she stopped responding to messages. At first, there was no reason to suspect a crime. Public figures occasionally miss appointments or become unavailable. But as communication suddenly stopped, concern slowly began to grow. Eventually, those concerns resulted in the welfare check that led police to her home. That sequence of events may ultimately prove critical. Without those unanswered messages, investigators may not have discovered the crime until much later. As news spread across Britain, officers appealed for information while keeping many important details confidential. They did not publicly describe exactly how the attack happened. They did not explain whether anything had been stolen. They also refused to speculate about a possible motive. Instead, detectives focused on gathering evidence. Every vehicle seen near the property, every possible witness, every available CCTV camera, and every forensic trace became part of the investigation. Then another development added even more uncertainty. Police initially arrested one suspect during the early stages of the investigation, but after further inquiries, that individual was released and was no longer considered part of the case. That decision suggested detectives were carefully following the evidence rather than rushing toward conclusions. The investigation was clearly evolving. Behind the scenes, officers from multiple police forces were working together, sharing intelligence and examining every possible lead. Meanwhile, the public was left asking the same question. If this was not a random act, then who had entered Anne Widdecombe's home and why? The answer would soon take investigators hundreds of miles away from the quiet countryside of Devon. The breakthrough came on Saturday evening. Nearly 3 days after Anne Widdecombe's body was discovered, police announced that a 28-year-old man had been arrested at an address in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, on suspicion of murder. The arrest was carried out by officers from counter-terrorism policing, working alongside Devon and Cornwall police and South Yorkshire police. While the involvement of counter-terrorism officers immediately attracted public attention, investigators quickly explained that this did not mean they believed the attack was an act of terrorism. In fact, detectives made an unusually direct statement. At this stage of the investigation, they said there was nothing to suggest the killing was politically motivated. They also confirmed there was no evidence linking the case to terrorism. Those comments were significant. Anne Widdecombe had spent decades in British politics. She had held strong and often controversial views on issues ranging from immigration to criminal justice. Because of her public profile, many people immediately wondered whether her political career had made her a target. Police urged the public not to jump to conclusions. Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman told reporters that investigators were keeping an open mind about the motive. Every possibility was still being examined, but no theory had yet been supported by the evidence. That careful approach reflected how homicide investigations are conducted in Britain. Detectives often know far more than they are willing to reveal publicly. Releasing information too early can damage witness testimony, alert potential suspects, or even weaken a future prosecution. Every public statement is therefore measured against the needs of the investigation. Another important announcement followed. Police confirmed they were no longer looking for anyone else in connection with the case. That suggested investigators believed the arrest represented a major step forward. At the same time, an arrest is not the same as a conviction. Detectives still needed to gather enough evidence to establish exactly what happened inside the house and why. The movements of the suspect now became one of the investigation's biggest priorities. Officers would attempt to reconstruct his journey before and after the suspected attack. They would examine mobile phone records, vehicle movements, digital evidence, financial transactions, and forensic material collected during the arrest. Even small details could become critical. A single fingerprint, a DNA trace, a mobile phone signal, a receipt, or a camera recording from a nearby road. Modern murder investigations often depend on connecting hundreds of small pieces of evidence rather than discovering one dramatic clue. Meanwhile, detectives continued to receive information from the public. Within days, more than 120 reports had been submitted by people who believed they might have seen something unusual or possessed information that could assist the inquiry. Each report had to be assessed, verified, and compared with the growing timeline of events. Investigators also remained focused on the house itself. Forensic teams continued searching for evidence that could explain how the attacker entered the property, whether there had been any struggle, and how long the offender remained inside before leaving. One question continued to dominate the investigation. Was Anne Widdecombe deliberately targeted by someone she knew, or was there another explanation that had not yet come to light? At this stage, police were refusing to speculate. Instead, they were allowing the evidence to guide every decision. As detectives worked behind closed doors, Britain waited for answers. But to understand why this case captured the nation's attention so quickly, it is necessary to look beyond the crime scene and examine the remarkable public life of the woman at its centre. For many people outside Britain, Anne Widdecombe may simply be remembered as a former politician. But inside the United Kingdom, she was far more than that. Over several decades, she became one of the country's most recognisable public figures. She served as a Conservative Member of Parliament for more than 20 years and held ministerial positions during her political career. Known for her direct style and willingness to defend unpopular opinions, she rarely avoided controversy. Supporters admired her for speaking her mind. Critics often strongly disagreed with her views. But regardless of political opinion, almost everyone recognised her name. After leaving Parliament, Anne Widdecombe did not disappear from public life. Instead, she became a familiar face on British television, appearing in documentaries, political debates, interviews, and entertainment programmes. Her appearances introduced her to a new generation that knew her as much for television as for politics. Unlike many former politicians who remain in London, Widdecombe chose a quieter life. She settled in the countryside near Haytor, on the edge of Dartmoor National Park in Devon. The region is known for its dramatic landscapes, open moorland and small rural communities. It is often described as one of the most peaceful parts of England. That peaceful setting made the murder even more shocking. Violent crimes are relatively uncommon in the area, and the idea that such a well-known public figure could be killed inside her own home left many local residents struggling to understand what had happened. Neighbours described the community as quiet, where unusual activity would normally attract attention. Detectives therefore faced another important question. Had someone been watching the property before the attack? Or had the suspect arrived without attracting notice? Investigators have not answered those questions publicly, but they are exactly the type of issues homicide detectives examine during the early stages of an inquiry. Police would likely study every available source of evidence: road cameras, automatic number plate recognition systems, mobile phone location data, witness statements, delivery records, and any digital activity connected to the victim during her final days. Each piece helps investigators build a timeline that can either support or eliminate possible theories. Another important issue concerns access to the property itself. At this stage, police have not said whether there were signs of forced entry. That detail could become extremely significant. If there was no forced entry, detectives would naturally explore whether the victim knew the person who entered the house or whether another explanation exists. If there was forced entry, investigators would examine how it occurred when it happened, and whether it matched evidence found elsewhere at the scene. For now, those answers remain confidential. British police often withhold key forensic details while interviews are taking place. Information known only to investigators can later help verify the credibility of witness statements or suspect interviews. Meanwhile, tributes continued to arrive from across the political spectrum. People who had agreed with Anne Widdecombe's views and those who had opposed them alike expressed shock at the circumstances of her death. Many emphasized that political disagreements should never overshadow the seriousness of a murder investigation. As public interest continued to grow, detectives repeated the same message. Do not speculate. Rumours spreading online could interfere with the investigation, create unnecessary fear, or unfairly accuse innocent people. Instead, investigators urged anyone with genuine information to come forward. Behind that public appeal, officers were quietly working to answer the question that still remained unresolved. What exactly happened during the missing 24 hours between the suspected attack and the discovery of Anne Widdecombe's body? The answer to that question may ultimately determine not only how this crime unfolded, but also whether investigators can fully explain the motive behind one of the most shocking killings involving a former British politician in recent memory. Although investigators have now made an arrest, the case is far from over. In British criminal investigations, an arrest marks the beginning of an intensive effort to establish exactly what happened, not the end of the process. Detectives must now answer several critical questions. Can they place the suspect at the scene? Can forensic evidence connect him directly to the attack? Can they establish a clear timeline that explains every important movement before and after the killing? And perhaps the most difficult question of all, why did this happen? So far, police have deliberately avoided offering any explanation for a possible motive. They have ruled out nothing, but they have also confirmed nothing beyond the evidence already collected. That approach reflects one of the fundamental principles of modern homicide investigations. Detectives build their case from facts rather than assumptions. Every conclusion must be supported by evidence that can stand up in court. Investigators will now examine a wide range of material. Forensic scientists will analyze DNA, fingerprints, clothing, footwear impressions, and any biological evidence recovered from the property. Digital investigators will study mobile phones, computers, communication records, and electronic devices. Financial investigators may review bank activity and recent transactions if they believe those records could explain the relationship between the victim and the suspect. At the same time, specialist interview teams will continue questioning witnesses whose information may help fill the remaining gaps in the timeline. Even seemingly ordinary details can become decisive. A vehicle captured by a roadside camera, a phone call made at an unexpected time, a purchase recorded by a payment terminal, a neighbour remembering an unfamiliar sound. Cases that appear impossible to solve are often broken open by one small piece of evidence that connects everything else. The Crown Prosecution Service will eventually have to decide whether the available evidence meets the legal standard required to bring criminal charges. That decision cannot be based on public opinion or media attention. It must be based entirely on evidence that can be presented before a jury. Until then, the suspect remains entitled to the presumption of innocence under British law. For the family of Anne Widdecombe, however, the legal process is only one part of the story. They have lost a mother, a relative, and a woman whose life was spent in public service. Police have confirmed that specialist family liaison officers continue to support them as the investigation progresses. Meanwhile, residents of the quiet Devon community where she lived are still trying to come to terms with the violence that shattered their peaceful surroundings. Many are asking whether this was an isolated incident or whether warning signs existed that nobody recognised at the time. For investigators, every answer leads to another question. What was the connection between the victim and the suspect, if any? How was the property entered? What happened inside the house during those final moments? And why did almost an entire day pass before the crime was discovered? Those answers have not yet been released, and detectives have made it clear that speculation could interfere with the investigation. As more forensic results become available and investigators continue reviewing evidence, the picture may become clearer. Until then, this remains a case defined by unanswered questions. A respected former Member of Parliament was found dead inside her own home. A suspect has been arrested, but the motive remains unknown. The final chapter of this investigation has yet to be written. As always, we will continue following verified developments as they emerge. Based on the evidence currently available, many important questions remain unanswered, and only the ongoing investigation and future court proceedings can determine exactly what happened.